Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you joining today. We're thrilled to resume our RackWare Academy training sessions. Um, to that extent, I want to thank everyone for their time. As you have any questions for this live training of RackWare, we have the open Q&A box. So any questions you may have, please submit your questions into the Q&A box. The chat will be disabled. Myself and my colleague and a few other colleagues will be monitoring the Q&A box. Any questions that we don't address in the chat Q&A box, we'll address at the end of the session and read those out loud and answer your questions. But the goal of it will be to get those questions addressed in the Q&A box. In addition, after the end of the session, we'll be providing everyone with a recording link. So you'll get access to the recorded session, be able to share that with your colleagues and use it for a later time for a refresher. And to that, I want to introduce my peer and colleague, Principal Solution Architect, David Gioso.
Great. Hey, Mike. Thanks. Thanks everybody for joining. So I've got a pretty good session for you here. We're going to go over a lot of the basics. I'll take a look at the agenda in just a minute. And everything you see in all the documents that you see, I've got those put aside in a folder for you, and I'm going to post that link. You'll have access to that right now. A lot of the documentation, of course, is also on our support portal. We're going to take a look at that. So I would say hold off on your questions for the first 15 or 20 minutes. Again, as Mike said, we're recording this session. We're going to get you that recording. All the documents you see, you'll have access to all the documents, and you'll have access to be able to contact us for additional questions, scheduling proof of concepts, or of course, getting demo licenses. So with that, let me go ahead and get started with our training. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can post this in the Q&A right now. Let's hold on one second. There we go. Perfect. Okay. See if I can actually post this in the chat for you guys. You won't be using the chat, but I think you can access the chat with this link. If not, Rodolfo, maybe you can share that in the Q&A. I don't see the Q&A in my setup here. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Let me put that in the Q&A. Open that. All right, great. Okay, so that is the link to all the documentation here that you're going to see that we'll be using. And let me grab that for you real quick. Take a quick look at what you've got. So we have the two main documents we'll be looking at is our prerequisite guide. That's really your key document that's going to have a lot of this information. And the other document will be the cloud parameters and operations guide. And then I put a lot of other things in here that we'll discuss later, more of some diagnostic tools and some advanced operation guides and things like that. So we'll go ahead and get started. I have slides, but we're really going to be doing this live we're going to use Oracle Cloud for now because I've got an account set up in there for us. But of course, this applies to all of the supported hyperscalers. So I'm going to go ahead and drop my video for you now. So make sure we don't have any dropouts, but be aware I'm here and we'll continue on and I'll pick that back up in towards the end of this session. So our agenda, we're going to do a quick product overview, talk about network. We're actually going to install the RackWare engine. We're going to configure our source hosts. We have cloud settings, and we're going to create our waves. And a wave is really just a list of hosts we wish to perform an operation against. So that could be migration, it could be disaster recovery, it could be assessment. Then we'll talk about validation and some basic troubleshooting. If you have additional questions after this, please feel free to reach out to info@rackwareinc.com or sales@rackwareinc.com, either one of those. And then the questions you have, please post those in our Q&A. Rodolfo from RackWare here, one of our senior engineers, is online and helping to answer those questions. And again, all the documents you see, you'll be able to have access to them. So RackWare, we are a software company. We have two main software products that we develop. One is called our RackWare Migration Module, or RMM, and that is our x86-based workload migration, disaster recovery, and assessment engine. So this is to move all your VMware, KVM, AWS, Windows and Linux hosts from one data center to another, or moving them from one hyperscaler to another, or from on-prem to the cloud, or from the cloud back to on-prem. That's all your basic Windows and Linux, and that's what we're going to be working with today. And then we also have another product called Swift, and that is a similar workflow. It's designed for containerized migration, disaster recovery, and backups, moving the stuff from, EKS to OKE or Kubernetes, OpenShift, up into the cloud or back down to your data center, or just providing disaster recovery and backup. We'll have an additional webinar on the Swift. I think we might even have one recorded. So if you're interested in that, just reach out to that info link. The RackWare RMM for the Windows and Linux servers supports both cloud migration, converged disaster recovery and backup, and assessment. And we'll take a look at some of that assessment. I'll show it to you if we have some time. Our support matrix is very large, so we can move workloads or protect them from pretty much anywhere to anywhere. So we can protect you from, on-prem into Google Cloud, on-prem into Oracle Cloud, or from Oracle Cloud to Google Cloud, or Azure, AWS, IBM, all of those hyperscalers, and all of your major hypervisors. So we're talking, all the VMware hypervisors to KVM, to Xen, to Oracle VM, even to Nutanix, pretty much what you're going to see in the enterprise environment, we support, and we support with all of our automation technologies also. And we're going to show you what that looks like. Operating system support is very broad. We look at the support matrix based on the OS and your target hypervisor or hyperscaler. So we support all the way back to Windows 2008 R2, and then we go all the way back to Red Hat CentOS version 5.2, and of course SUSE, Ubuntu, and Debian, and all of those, and then all of the current versions of the OSs are supported. And I'll show you where that is in the support matrix. So if you've got a bunch of Windows 2012 on up servers and some, Oracle Linux version 6 on up, and you want to move those into a target environment, as long as the target hypervisor or hyperscaler supports that in one manner or another, then it's fully supported by RackWare. We can do things such as pullouts of VMware. So if you've got workloads running in OCVS and VMware and Oracle Cloud, and you want to move all those to OCI native, this is exactly the tool you want to use. We can pull all of those workloads out of VMware and move them into OCI native with a very minimal downtime, probably minutes for your actual cutover. And then, of course, we support any of the other VMware on the cloud. So VMware in Google Cloud or AWS or Azure VMware solution. And you want to get out of those VMware environments and, of course, on-prem, and you want to move those to a native cloud or even back to a different on-prem environment, this is your tool. Fully automated. And the workflow we're going to do today is exactly what it would look like for pretty much any of the hyperscalers or hypervisors there are. So you want to move out of the Google VMware Cloud, and you want to move these to just Google native. This is exactly what you'll do. And of course, with AWS to AWS, into IBM Cloud or Azure. So pretty much everything, all the combinations you can think of. And we're not going to talk too much salesy stuff here. Very high level of automation. I'm going to show you that. Any cloud to any cloud. We also support in-memory databases. So SAP HANA databases. This is the workflow you will use. Microsoft SQL, Mariah database, any of those typical databases you've got. This is what you're going to use to move those into your target data center. And one of the key things we have is non-disruptive testing in the target site. So you can do all these cutovers. You will not disrupt your production workloads. You can test all your migrated hosts and validate those before you actually do final delta syncs and cutovers. So that's really key. Let's take a look. So at a really high level, what you do is you have this RackWare engine. It's just a virtual machine, typically deployed in the target environment, but it can be deployed in the source environment for migrations. It'll connect into the source hosts over layer 3. It's going to create an SSH connection to each individual host. It's going to gather information about those workloads, CPU, memory, OS, things like that. It's going to bring that information back to the RackWare engine, and then it's going to sync all that data from those hosts to the target cloud. It's going to automatically create the virtual machines. It's going to automatically sync all the data to those target systems itself. Then after you've done the initial heavy lifting and you've validated these workloads, you can perform additional Delta syncs according to whatever schedule you have. And the Delta syncs are very efficient. All it needs to do is look at the source host, see what files changed, sync those changes across, and then you can start to schedule your cutover with those metrics you'll have. So we'll be able to generate reports and say, well, these 100 hosts, they took about 8 minutes to do these Delta syncs. So you'll know your cutover window is 8 minutes for the Delta sync, plus the time for you to switch to load balancers or whatever other infrastructure you have in order to complete the cutover. So let's get into this here. Let's not talk too much. Again, containers, we can support all the major containerized environments from on-prem to the cloud, EKS, OKE, Google Cloud, Azure, OpenStack, and then OpenShift, all those, Tanzu. So pretty much any of those combinations you would look for. Network topology, the ports that we're going to use from the RackWare engine to our source host, TCP/22. From the RackWare engine to the targets is port 22 and 445 for Windows. And console access is HTTPS, so port 443. ICMP is nice, but you don't have to have it. This is what it looks like from a topology perspective. I'm deploying my RackWare engine in my target environment because we're going to be doing some disaster recovery also. And for disaster recovery, you need to have the RackWare engine in the target or the DR site, because that's where we're going to be protecting the data. It's going to connect into the source host on port 22, and then it's going to connect into all of our target subnets on port 22 when it deploys the resources for you. And we're going to access the UI, of course, on 443. A typical deployment is a different source and target subnets. So you've got different subnets here that you're having your targets land on, but we also can support same IP addresses for disaster recovery or even migrations. So if you want to have the same subnets in the target environment, you just need to create those target subnets that would be the same. And then we're going to place what we call this RackWare bridge server. It's basically just a NAT engine. We're going to create a GRE or a foo over UDP tunnel to the bridge server. And the RackWare engine is going to access our source host via the NATed network. Now, if you have a project that requires that, you just reach out. We have some more slides. We don't have time to talk about this. There's 20 different ways to configure this, and it's supported across all the clouds and hyperscalers. We have a lot of typical VMware pullouts from the cloud to native, and they want to keep the same subnets. And we're using a setup very similar to this. The GRE tunnel works really well. Takes a few minutes to set this up. No additional cost for software. So we'll talk about that. Installation. Installation, we have most of the listings on Marketplace for both the bring your own license, like doing proof of concepts, or paid listings where you actually deploy the RackWare engine and all the licenses are just paid via the hourly charges on a typical OCI or Google or IBM Marketplace. But we can also install the RackWare engine from setup packages. So if you need to deploy the RackWare engine on-prem in your VMware or your KVM environment, something like that, you're basically just going to build a virtual machine with Red Hat version 8. You're going to add a data disk. You're going to download the RackWare installer, and you're going to run the installer, and you're going to submit the license to our licensing group. So very, very simple. It's just a matter of creating a virtual machine and installing the RackWare engine on top of that. And that's what the cloud images already have for you. And we're going to go to those cloud images in just a second. All right, let's get into it. So the rest of this is actual configuration. Let's go ahead and bring up our engine here. Drop this out of here for a second. Okay, so we're going to use Oracle Cloud as an example. And in Oracle Cloud, I created a couple source machines in a different region, and then we're going to deploy a RackWare engine in what I'm going to call my target or my disaster recovery region, but it's also my migration landing zone. So all we need to do, see here, actually, let me show you real quick. There we go. So here is what this looks like. within OCI Marketplace. If you want to search on what we're doing right now, just go to the Oracle Cloud Marketplace and do a search for RackWare. And within RackWare, we've got these listings. So this is a bring your own license. This is for POCs and demos. This is what we're going to deploy today within OCI Marketplace. These are the paid listings, such as I'm going to do a paid deployment for migration of servers, and this is a paid deployment for disaster recovery. So this is what we're going to be looking at today. And then also you can take a look at the Google Cloud Marketplace, just search for RackWare. With RackWare, you want to deploy the actual RackWare virtual machine that builds the RackWare engine. And then the rest of these, the cloud migration, disaster recovery, and the assessment, these are the licensing structures for the paid licenses within Google Cloud itself. And again, all the clouds are a little bit different. Just reach out to us. We'll tell you exactly what you need to deploy. And of course, in IBM Cloud, we've got the same. We don't have it in AWS right now. Don't have a lot of people landing in AWS, but just reach out. It's very easy to deploy within AWS also. Okay, so let's get started. Let's deploy our RackWare engine. So I'm just going to say create an instance, give it a name. We're going to place it in our target disaster recovery environment here. We're going to select the image. So we're going to go to Marketplace and search for RackWare. Okay, and then for RackWare, here it is, this BYOL. So this is the one that you can get some licenses from our licensing group, so you can do some tests or proof of concepts with your customers. So you just select that and you accept. And there we go. There's our image. Right now, we're just going to deploy this with one CPU and 12 gigs of memory. That's kind of the minimal. When you actually have a true deployment, you scale this up according to your needs, how many hosts you're going to protect or migrate. We scale these cores memory up accordingly. And so when you get to that, you just reach out to us and we'll help you architect what you're going to need. Say next. Don't really care about any of this, most of the defaults. So we're just going to select, we've got our DR VCN and our DR subnet. That's great. We're going to go ahead and allow it to have a public IP address so we can access it easily. And then we're going to go ahead and just upload my SSH key here. All right, so I have access to it. Perfect. All right, and then take a look here. Our boot volume, don't touch that. But we will go ahead and add an additional block volume. You only need this additional block volume for disaster recovery. You don't need it if you're doing migrations, just disaster recovery. So we're going to do this because we are going to do a DR setup. We're going to add a small one here so I can show you what that looks like. I'm going to create a new volume. Sorry. Our data disk. Great. We're going to attach it. For us, doesn't need to be much. Perfect. And don't need to do anything else. Just actually, I happen to like paravirtualized as my attachment type. So I always use paravirtualized in OCI. Read and write, and that's it. So we're going to attach that paravirtualized. So create that, take a look, and should be good to go. Don't have to do much. It's already set up for you. All right, so that's going to take 2 or 3 minutes to kind of get that started. And while that is going, we're going to take a look at that one document that I mentioned earlier. That document is here, this RackWare prerequisite and operation requirements. This is what you really need to look at first. It's going to go over almost everything that we're talking about today. So it talks about workflow, creating keys, RackWare installation. Installation depends on how you're doing it, whether you're doing it from the installer file or from the marketplace. But what gets really neat is here's your supported operating systems, your supported target environments. So we can look here and we go, oh, what do we support for target environments? Here's your cloud, including Oracle PCA, Amazon course, Zadara Cloud. There's actually more than what's in here, so you can reach out for the most current. Um, Supported target environments for pre-provisioned. Pre-provisioned is something we'll talk about in a minute. We have options for auto provisioning of the targets or pre-provisioned in an environment that may be something that isn't quite supported yet for the automatic provisioning, but we can still support that as a migration landing zone or even DR. Here's your uh, supported origin operating systems and your file systems. So this is what's key. We have operating systems and file systems. So as long as this file systems and the operating systems fit within the matrix, then we can go ahead and perform all of these workflows. We talk about firewall ports. So kind of everything we're going to talk about today is all laid out for you here. And even when we do our setup, it talks about how we're going to set up our source Linux hosts, and it'll talk about how we set up our Windows ones. So we'll kind of circle back to this in just a minute. Let's see what we've got here. So done. Let's go to our instances. Let's try and get logged into this guy real quick. Public IP. All right, let's see what we got here. So the login is OPC. Standard Oracle login for this instance itself. Each marketplace has a slightly different login, of course. Some are root, some are like a specific user you add. And then, of course, we've got to add our key. There we go. Let's see here. Go ahead. Change this to something we can actually see. All right, perfect. Here we are. Okay, so here is our instance, the RackWare engine we just deployed. It's that simple. All right, we'll go ahead and elevate ourselves to root. So everything we're going to do on the RackWare engine will always be as root. So just remember that. You're always going to log in. First thing you're going to do is elevate to root. Okay, so there's a few setup things we need to do for Oracle Cloud. I'm going to circle back to our quick start guide in a few minutes, but I'm just going to walk you through it because I want to make sure we actually get everything here without looking at too much documentation. But very simply, the first thing we need to do after we launch our instance is we need to create our admin user. All basic Linux commands, we're going to create our admin user. Then we're going to go ahead and add a password to the admin user. Right, let's get this in there. Okay. The admin user is only used for accessing the UI. That's the only thing you're ever going to use it for. You're not going to log in with it. You're only going to use it to access the UI. If you need to change the admin user's password to the UI, then you simply just change the password here like you would do any other Linux user. The next thing we need to do after we do that is we need to generate our SSH keys. So let me pull up a quick doc for you here. Right, and there we go. So in the Oracle marketplace, there is a document called Quick Start Guide here. And we'll look at all this where those links are in just a few minutes here. But if you go to that listing, in the listing, there's actually a link to the document. It starts to talk about a lot of things we're talking about now. Let's see, make this a little bigger for you here. Right, perfect. Great. Okay. And we're not going to get into this too much, how it's deployed and everything, because it's different for each listing. But it talks about, what do we need to do, in OCI? You need to go ahead and, set up your security list to allow access to this RackWare appliance. So we've got to be able to get in on port 22 so we can SSH into it, and of course be able to access the UI on port 443. So some basic information here on setting up, security lists and ingress rules in OCI. We don't get into this too much because that documentation is already there. It's different for every cloud. But of course, you have to allow the access from your jump box or workstation into the RackWare engine so you can manage it. And so here we go. You're going to configure this, run everything as sudo. You're going to add this admin password, and then you're going to generate your root SSH keys. So nearly everything is a cut and paste here. So we want to go ahead and cd root.ssh. We have no keys. We need those keys to be able to connect into our source host. So we'll generate some keys. I'm going to use all the defaults, no passphrase. And so now we have a private and a public SSH key. And you'll see what we're going to do with these in just a second. Then we want to go ahead and because this was the bring your own license, it's not licensed. I want to go and say, hey, RackWare, I'm doing a proof of concept or I'm playing with this in my demo environment. Can I have a couple licenses so I can do that? You're going to go ahead and run this license command right here. So we're going to cd to /etc RackWare, do an ls, perfect. And we're going to generate a license. All right, so pre-install license key, just run that command and then it generates this file. All right, so now we're going to take about 2 minutes while I send this off to the licensing group and I'm going to get my license file back. So pretty much you would send this attach it to an email, licensing@rackwareinc.com, maybe CC your salesperson also or sales so we can get you some licenses to either, perform the POC or play with it in your own environment. So give me just a minute or two. It's a great time to take a break and get a cup of coffee while I go ahead and get this license generated. Right. And feel free to look up that link with the documentation while I'm doing this. Okay, perfect. Give me just a few moments here. There we go. A lot of screens open here. Just licensing, guys. Okay. License file. Yeah. Okay. Almost there. 30 more seconds and we'll be good to go. All right, here we are. Just one more 10 seconds. See if we got that transferred over. All right, okay. So here is our RackWare engine. And remember, I had this pre-install file. I sent this off to the licensing group, and they sent me back this license file itself. So we are in etc RackWare. That's where you're going to place it. And then once we do that, we're going to restart this RackWare engine for that license to take effect. So rwadm restart. Give that a moment. Hopefully, there we go. So we're running. We can check the statuses. So there's 2 levels of commands within the RackWare engine. There's the RWADM, which is your management commands. We're going to be using a few of those. And then there's our CLI, RWCLI. They're 2 very different commands. So I'm going to check the status on my services. Status all. So it looks like everything is running. And then I'm going to go ahead and check my license status here, RWCLI, RMM show. So you can see this now we're getting into the command line. And this is going to tell us the software version. It's going to tell us what kind of licensing we have and whether it's valid and whether everything is running. So I've got 10 licenses, good for 60 days, and they're fully open for all of the features, which is our disaster recovery, backup, migration, and even in this one. This version doesn't have the assessment. It's a different listing for assessment, but it's all being converged and will be updated, I think, in the next 2 weeks on all of the marketplaces. So this looks very good. Looks like everything is up and running. So the next thing you want to do is simply log into your RackWare engine. Grab a web page here. HTTPS. And we're going to accept this. Okay, perfect. Let's move this over here, easy to find. And so here's our RackWare engine. Remember the user's admin, and then that password that I input earlier when I created that admin account. So that's it. So we'll save that. So we have deployed our RackWare engine and licensed it, all that in, well, I don't know, 8 minutes or something to that effect. Total. It's very quick to deploy the RackWare engine. It's also very easy to deploy it on-prem. If your customers got a VMware pullout, they want on-prem, they want to deploy the RackWare engine on-prem in VMware, and they want to move everything up to OCI or Google Cloud. It's very similar. You just create an OS, install the RackWare software, and then get a license, and you're good to go. Okay, so let's take a look at our getting started guide, and let's see what else there was in there. So hold on a second. There it is. All right, so it says, hey, generate those keys, get your RackWare license, log in. Oh, we did all that. Super. Next thing it says is let's prepare some of these source hosts. All right, so we have how to prepare a Linux source host and how to prepare a Windows source host. And again, those are in that the RackWare document from earlier, the prerequisite guide. So here it is, setting up other than a root host in Linux. We like to use the RackWare user or a RackWare user name for that. So you can separate when RackWare is logging into your Linux machines. And if you're doing a migration, of course, you can remove it after the migration is complete. So let's just take a quick look at a Linux host, and we'll set the Linux host up. So let me log into a source machine. Got one right here for you. Right, sorry, it's going to get a little bit messy. Let me try and move some things around. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you. All right, so just take this. I think that'll be nice. Okay, so this is my source Linux host running in my source environment. And it says, okay, RackWare, how do I do this? First thing I'm going to do, and I've already done some of this, so I wanted to save us a few minutes because we really want to make sure we get through all of this. But cut and paste, literally, you got a source Linux machine, you are root on that source Linux machine, and then you're going to add a RackWare user. Then after you add the RackWare user, which I've already done here, you're going to take a look at this document on the RackWare engine itself. Okay, so let's take a look at our RackWare engine real quick. I'm going to go back and forth a little bit here. So here's our RackWare engine. We're just going to go ahead and clear that. We're going to cat that document. Okay, here's some information. And what we want to do is we want to go back to our source host and we want to put that into our sudoers config file. So we're just going to do a vi sudo. Sorry. Right? And in our sudoers config file, I've already pasted this in here. So it's exactly the same. I pasted at the end of the sudoers config file. This is important. And I make sure I get all of the information in here, including the information that's hashed. So it says this user, the RackWare user we created, is allowed to run as root and requires TTY so we can send scripted commands to it. So this is very important. If you wanted to use a user other than RackWare, had a customer who wanted to name it migrate, that's fine. Create the migrate user. Make sure you change this to be that correct username. So it doesn't really matter to us. If you want to use the root user and share the keys, you can do that also. That's even easier because then you just add the key to the authorized key file as any other SSH connection. So we already have that. That's our sudoers config. Let's get out of that, right? And let's see what else it says. After I've added that, I'm going to come over here to my source host and I'm going to create these directories. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to elevate myself to the RackWare user. So we'll do that. So here's my source host. I'm going to go ahead and log in as the RackWare user. And I would run all these commands, make these directories, make this authorized keys. So that's already there. After I make those directories, I'm going to go ahead and get my SSH public key from the RackWare engine. This is important because that's what we're going to use for all of our source hosts. They're going to use the same public key. We're going to access into the source machines, both Windows and Linux. So I'm going to take a look at that key on my RMM server. So we'll just cat this file. Sorry, I'm terrible at cut and paste. Okay, so remember our RackWare server. So here is our public key right there. Boom. And it says, all right, copy that to the clipboard, and then you're going to paste it here. All right, so let's do that real quick. So we'll do this, copy here. We're the RackWare user. You have to be the RackWare user to place this in the correct file. We're just do a VI on our home.ssh RackWare keys. I have a lot of them in there because I do a lot of this stuff. So we're just going to go to the very end. We're going to do an insert. Then I'm going to grab my key. I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to save. Perfect. Okay, so then come over here, and I'm going to test my connectivity to my source Linux server. So SSH, remember RackWare was our user at, and then we need its IP address. Oh, what was the IP address? Let's find it real quick. It is, oh, sorry, it's right here. I got it in my notes. Save us a minute. Okay. Say yes, because it's a new key. Boom. So what we've done is from the RackWare engine, we've made an SSH connection to our source hosts, and we're not being prompted for a password. So we made a secure SSH connection, created the tunnel, and we're able to log in directly as the RackWare user to our source host. So that's it. We're done. We were able to verify the RackWare engine can reach this Linux source host that we're going to do some workflows against. So we're done there. That was the setup. You can script that in any way you want, of course, or however you want to deploy this through LDAP, that user. You just need to have a sudoers config file. All of this is just kind of the manual steps that you can use, but you can automate this in any way you would like. Okay, so let's see here. Great, so we are in our RackWare engine. Our Linux host is pretty much done. We don't need to look at that one anymore at this point in time. So this is what this talks about. Here is something very important. It gets overlooked all the time. There's more details in the prerequisite guide. Okay, it tells you a few more things. It also talks about, you also have to have a few other things configured. We need to talk about free extents. So if we're doing disaster recovery, we really do want you to have free extents on any LVM volumes so we can take an LVM snapshot. We can go into more details about that later, but this is important. So in order to have transaction consistent data, we prefer to have the LVM snapshot so we can guarantee we're copying the data from the snapshots here. Talking about a minimum about 15% of free space on those LVM volumes. And again, it's very easy to add additional space on virtual machines and add that as free extents to Linux hosts. It's very, very quick. Only takes just a minute or two for each one, and you only have to do it once. We also talk a little bit about here specific utilities that need to be run. If there's any antivirus running on this Linux host, you need to go ahead and whitelist this directory, the Mount RackWare directory. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems. The antivirus is going to kill the RackWare sync engine or slow it down. We also need to think about whether no exec is set on var or temp or var temp. Again, these are some advanced things, but this is just some stuff to look at for Linux because we need to be able to execute some commands in var temp in order to perform the syncs themselves. We have to be able to tell it to take an LVM snapshot, and then we have to be able to run our sync engine in order to sync that data. We're going to circle back around to that workflow in just a minute. So make sure you look at this and make sure you fulfill the prereqs. Sometimes this will work without fulfilling all the prereqs, and half the time you run into problems a little bit later because they were not completely filled. Then we talk about Windows. So we're going to do a Windows setup real quick. Windows is similar. We need space for volume shadow copies. You need some free space on the volume so we can take a VSS shadow copy snapshot. And then we're going to install an SSH client and then configure that SSH client with the correct SSH key. We talk about policies, login as a service. Every Windows environment is slightly different. So the AD domain admin can just take a look at these prereqs and help you very easily. All of this can be done through group policy, so it can be easily deployed across 5,000 machines through a GPO, exactly what we're going to do. So let's do it. We're going to run this installer. So I have a Windows host ready to go. Let's find this one here. And this Windows host, I've already downloaded the RackWare installer. So if you want to get this RackWare SSH installer, you really can just grab it from your RackWare engine itself. Just put the IP address. This is the path. You can download it from a browser. You can download it through WinSCP. You can push it up to this machine in any manner you want. It's just a file. It's very small, 31 megs or something like that. So I think I already have this installed, but we'll uninstall it. No, I've already uninstalled it. So all you need to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to double click on the installer. Second here, sorry, I don't know what I did. I was having a little trouble with the machine earlier, to be honest with you. I had to reboot it twice. Got a feeling there's something wrong here. And let's grab this. Yeah, I think this machine somehow got compromised earlier. There we go. Okay, so first thing I'm going to show you some kind of troubleshooting tools. So I'm going to do a netstat minus AN before I install the RackWare engine, okay? And I just came up with this, I saw this and yeah, so for some reason we're already listening on port 22. Let's see why. Yep, okay, let's remove these RackWare services. Okay, so it was already installed. Yep, double click on the installer, removes RackWare, double clicking again will install RackWare. So now here, before it was installed, and look, I have port 22 listening already because, of course, RackWare is listening on that. So let's look at this again, make sure nothing's there. Go back, netstat space minus AN. Nobody's listening on port 22. Now, it's important because if some other application is using port 22, you're going to have a conflict and we have to tell RackWare to use a different port number. So some sort of, some sort of other SCP program is actively running on the Windows host, you need to do something else. You need to tell RackWare to use a different port. So now I don't have anything because I've checked that. Nope, nobody's listening on port 22. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just run this RackWare installer. Say, yes, I agree. Defaults. And you're going to leave the username as all capitals system. We're not going to use a password because we want to go in at the system level account. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes, why we're going to need to do this. Port 22, if I needed to change it, this is where I change it here. But if you have to change the port on the source host, we have to add that to the configuration on the target host when we're doing our provisioning. So if you ever need to do something other than port 22, I would check in with support and ask them, how do I do this across my entire environment for my migrations or DR? There's generally one or two other things you need to do on the target side. We won't have time to cover those, but just remember that. Anything other than the default port, reach out to support and ask them, what else do I need to configure? And then here, it wants the SSH key. So we'll grab the public SSH key. Here it is. Remember, this is the key. Same as for Linux. It's all the same. It'll always be the same across all the hosts. And we'll paste that in there. We'll make sure we actually got all of it because it's everything, including the SSH. It's good. This is very painful. Hold on a second. Get closer. There we go. Yep, our SSH RSA and all the way to the end. So we'll say, yep, remember, no password. Don't have time to talk about all of these options. It can be done with a username and password. It complicates things when you're dealing with migrations, DR failovers. If you don't have AD, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Okay, our installation is complete. Now, with Windows, we have a couple other things to think about. If the Windows OS is running a firewall of any type, you have to allow TCP port 22 in. So we have to look at our firewall. We have to make sure that we have an inbound rule that's allowing port 22. So here, port 22 in, I can set a rule, new rule. It says, hey, it's a port Specific port, it's TCP, it's 22, right? Allow all, we need domain private and public in case we don't have an AD server when this thing comes online in our target environment. This is what's important. So we're going to allow it on all. Give a name, TCP 22. Of course, this can be done through netsh commands. So there you go. I've allowed inbound port 22. And if I'm running an antivirus, I need to make sure I have given the antivirus exceptions. I've disabled the antivirus on this one. Windows 2016 and above have the Windows Defender antivirus, so you need to either turn that off or give it the correct exceptions. You're going to run into problems where it's going to kill the RackWare engine from syncing, or it's going to take something that would normally take an hour to sync, and it's going to make it take 37 hours. Might be an exaggeration, but it really does add a lot of time because it intercepts all the reads and writes of the RackWare engine and it adds milliseconds to every single one of them. So you need to add the antivirus exceptions, look through the prerequisite guide, talks about everything we just did. And most importantly, in the prerequisite guide, it starts to talk about antivirus. So whether you got Windows or some other CrowdStrike, what have you, you need to go ahead and add these exceptions for the paths and the processes. And we give you examples for using PowerShell commands for Windows Defender, of course, for doing quick POCs or something like that. And that's it. That's the most important parts there. So now let's take a quick look. Let's do this. Netstat minus AN. Go back to the top. And here, port 22 is listening. So let's test this connection. We got our RackWare engine. We're almost ready to go. So here's a RackWare engine. We're going to SSH into that source Windows machine. It's system at, what is it, 129.213.144.60. Oh, say yes. And there we go. So we have connected via SSH into our Windows host. So all of our source machines, they're set up. We're good to go to now actually do the migrations or perform a disaster recovery workflow. So you'll do that with all of them. Again, this can all be done through GPO, through all of your Windows hosts. I've got many customers with multi-thousand machines that need to move out of VMware to anywhere at this point in time. And this is all you need to do. RackWare can connect into these source Windows machines and it can perform all of its operations. So let's push this one aside and let's move on. See what we got here. Talks about this getting started guide. It only gives you a little bit of information on preparing the source host. It might talk about antivirus, but it's exactly what we just did right now. Here talks about the antivirus. Make sure you get that in there. PowerShell commands. And now it says, hey, let's create a WAV file. Perfect. So let's do a Windows migration real quick. All right, so let's come back to our RackWare engine. Let's just do a quick refresh here. Where are we? This is our DR site. Okay, so we have our DR site, we have our RackWare engine, and I got one other thing running, another RackWare engine for later. Nothing else is in this compartment. So we'll come back to the RackWare engine, and we'll go ahead and we will create our first wave. Okay, I'm going to do the wave before we add our cloud user because I think this is a little more interesting. But we go to waves. We say create wave, and we're going to do it with a host. We'll say this is going to be our Windows migration. We just want to migrate this thing. We want to bring it from our wherever it is, source environment, VMware, KVM, and I want to bring it into OCI and have it running as a native instance. I'm going to use pass-through because I don't need to save any data. And I'm going to use auto provisioning because I want RackWare to do everything for me. Then I just have to give it the IP address of that source Windows machine. Right, let's grab that. And I got to give it a name. Okay, so the name of this machine, this is not the host name, but just what I want to call it. And for it, I want to put -src. This is hold on. Seems that my Zoom dropped for some reason.
You're back, David. We hear you.
I'm back, I hope. Were you guys catching everything up until that last 5 seconds,
Yep. Yeah, you were good until the last 5 seconds. You're back.
Jonathan? Oh, how odd. Can you guys hear me? Okay, hold on. Um, okay, let's try this again. I've never had this happen. Oh, see if I can share my screen. Okay, guys, please stop. Somebody else was having the same trouble earlier. Okay, hold on. Um, Let me switch to a different network quick. Okay, there we go. Let's get on a different network. Let's see if this will work. Can you guys hear me now? I hate to say that out loud, but Jonathan, anybody?
Yep, we can hear you, David.
Okay, that's a little odd. Okay, great. Well, okay. So I think you guys only lost me there for just the last minute or so. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we were setting up the wave. So hopefully, okay. So great, perfect. Okay, let me continue on. Excellent. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, let's continue on, and hopefully we don't have any more network dropouts here. All right, so we're going to continue on with our wave.
Yeah, if we can
We
share
were
your screen,
creating that
David.
Windows. Oh, thank you. I knew there was something missing. I've already shared it 5 times. So there we go. Thanks, guys. Perfect. Okay. So we were creating that wave. It's a Windows migration wave. We had the IP address. We wanted to give it the source name, and I put the hyphen src. This is just for me to see this in our database much easier. And it's a Windows host. And remember, the username is system. Okay. We're going to do a direct sync for this because we don't want to save that data. And what do we want to call this when we create our system in our target cloud? Well, I'm just going to call it this. I want to keep it easy, but it's the name of the virtual machine that gets created. I'm going to call it that just because it's going to be easy for us to see. But really, if I just wanted the actual name to be that, that's all I would put in there. This is what we're going to use to create the virtual machine, and that's what the name will be. So I'm going to hit create. All right, so this will bring us our first wave. And I'm going to have to log back in because I switched networks. Hold on a second. That's sorry. That was all in cache. We might have to do that again. All right. Yep. Let's just do it again real quick. Create wave. That was in cache because my Windows migration from auto provision pass through IP address real quick. Grab that. All right. And our friendly name. Great. Windows. Username is system. And we're going to do this. BST. All right, let's see if that works this time. Okay, super. So that's our Windows migration wave. And now we need to give it what we call our landing zone. So kind of it's set up for the first part. This could have 10, 15, this could have 100 IP addresses in there. And we can do this through a CSV file also. I just wanted to show it through the GUI. If you're doing 1, 2, or 3, it's very easy to do it through the GUI. We're going to talk about how we can upload CSV files in just a few minutes when you have hundreds and hundreds of machines and you have a lot of options you want to place against each one of those. The next thing we need to do is we need to get our cloud user or our destination information into the RackWare engine. So here we go to configuration, we go to cloud user, and here's where we will add our target environment. And so here's where we're going to add our GCP or IBM VPC or our OCI target environment, possibly Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager, and even the newer versions, they'll have KVM and OpenStack, CloudStack's already here. So pretty much all of those targets I was talking about that we can do what we call auto provisioning. RackWare creates everything for you automatically. This is where you'll set that up. So we're going to say, we're going to set this up for OCI. Okay. We're going to need to get some information, and we're going to need to have an account that will allow the API commands to be sent to it and perform the functions. So let's take a look at that getting started guide, because there's some cool stuff in here already. So this talks about our WAV file. We actually just did all this, but then we go gather your Oracle OCI account information here. So here's where it says, first thing we need to do is we're going to have to create an API key. So we're going to create an API signing key and assign that to a user that has the permissions to perform all those functions like create virtual machines and things like that. So we'll do this from the RackWare engine real quick. Let's log back in. Cool. Since all my connections were dropped. All right. So here's our RackWare engine. Let's just copy and paste. So it says, go log into your RackWare engine and elevate yourself to root. So, okay, make this a little bit bigger here. So, all right, we'll just do this copy, this make directory. Real simple. We try to make it copy and paste for you. It's a little different for each cloud provider. We have different instructions for each cloud provider. GCP is different, IBM is different, of course. We're going to CD into that one. We're going to create this key. Boom. Again, copy and paste. Don't have to think about this. Create this. Super. And there we go. And then show the output. So we'll cat our new key that we just created. Yeah, I know that's there. Let's get rid of that. Cut and paste. Cool. So this is the key that we just created. All right. And then this says, hey, this is the path to your private key. All right. So let's go ahead and go through. Now there's a lot of other stuff. It's all pertaining to each cloud. There's some references in here for Oracle Cloud. Of course, there'll be for each different cloud. But what we're going to do is we don't have time to look at all that to be able to get you the RackWare information. So in basically what you need is you need to have a user, and that for Oracle, you're going to have a user. That user is going to belong to a group. And we can see I have this RackWare DR group. And that group is going to have specific policies. And the policies I have for this group will allow it to provision and manage all resources in my disaster recovery compartment. And you can do this in 100,000 different ways. Just depends on how you're setting up your security or your cloud environment. But that's the basic idea of it. I've got a group. The group has policies which allow it to provision and perform all of the functions that RackWare needs to do in the disaster recovery compartment. And we do break all these different policies that are necessary out for all of the different clouds. So you can set them very granularly if you need to, and it's all in the documentation. And then that group, I have this user. And so with this user, I just need to create an API key to give that to the RackWare engine. So I'll go to API keys, and we'll add an API key. All right, we're going to paste it. Grab the whole key that we just created. So we're trying to make this as easy as possible for you. So we can just go here. We got this new API key specific to the RackWare engine, and we'll add it. Super. All right, and so when you do this in OCI, they very nicely give you all this information here that we're going to use for the RackWare engine. So here we go. We're going to use all this to add it to the RackWare engine. So keep that, set it aside in Notepad, which I just did. We can close it, come back to the RackWare engine. And remember here we said the case, we'll go back to it. We go to configuration, We go to cloud user, go to add. We're going to say, oh, OCI, and we're going to say Oracle, and we're going to do our user ID. So we're going to copy that from that information we set aside. We have our OSID for our user ID. We have our private key file that's actually on the RackWare engine, because remember, we generated it on the RackWare engine. So where is it on the RackWare engine? It's right where it set it in the docs, right there, root OCI. Then it had our fingerprint. Put that in there. Again, I'm just cutting and pasting from the information that Oracle gave me. Our tenant ID, our region, and I always forget my region is going to be not Ashburn, it is Phoenix. Okay, so I want this to drop into Phoenix. So I'm going to put these guys into Phoenix, make it easy for myself. There we go. So I choose my region. I don't need an API URL, and I just got to give it the compartment name. So my compartment name, I'm going to place these all in disaster recovery. So we'll just say disaster. Okay, so that looks good. You don't need a certificate. That's only for Oracle PCA. And you don't need an API URL. That would only be if we're supporting some other thing like OC 31, 35, different particular clouds within Oracle. Just reach out to sales. We'll help you with that stuff. There's a lot of things out there in Oracle Cloud. And hit add. So this takes like a minute or two. It really does. Oh, there we go. So when you get the green box, that means that we've authenticated this user, and this user does exist, and we made sure that we can do basic things like look and see different resources that were allowed within that particular compartment. So it does some basic checks. If it does not get added, it'll show up with a failed, and it'll give you some logging information there. So we've added our target environment, which is this Oracle environment, and then we come back over to replication, we go to waves, go to our Windows migration, and now we come over here to auto provision, and we select our target cloud, which is OCI. Our region was Phoenix, and then we have to get some of this other important information. So our domain, now you need the real domain information within Oracle, not just AD2 or AD1. You need to go actually look in your Oracle account, get your correct names. They're a little bit longer, like this is nref, blah, 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 AD2. So we need the true actual domain that for AD1, AD2, AD3, where you want to drop these. We don't need a fault domain. If your VCNs are within a different compartment other than your target compartment, then you place the VCN compartment in there so we know where to look for those particular VCNs. And then you give it the VCN name. And you can do this all by IDs also by selecting ID. So I want it to attach to this VCN, which happens to live in that compartment. Just keep it simple. And this subnet, disaster recovery, and I'm going to use a default provisioning type of paravirtualized. Now, we can talk about some other stuff here, but this is just the global setting for now. So I apply these changes, and now any hosts within here will be provisioned into my OCI account with the information I provided. I can then come down here to an individual line item, and I can make some more changes here. So that was the global settings for the wave. I can click on this edit button, and this tells me all the information I just placed in there. My sync options are some of the advanced options we'll try to get to a little bit later about how to exclude file systems and do file filters and things like that. But you also have your target cloud options, OCI options here, where it's been pre-populated with the defaults. But I can also change some of these where I can say, you know what? I want to make sure that RackWare, you land this on some nice E5 flex shapes for me. So I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I want to make sure you use E5 flex shapes. I want this machine to have 2 OCPUs and 12 gigs of memory, something like that. Hopefully that's a supported amount. I also might say I want to use a particular private IP address and specify that private IP address. Disk provisioning types, maybe I've got to have a different provisioning type. Storage keys, network security groups, cloud tags, cloud NICs, all that stuff you would normally add in your advanced configurations can be done through RackWare, and it can be done through the CSV file. I'm showing you in the GUI. We're going to circle back around to doing all this in a CSV file, which when you have hundreds of them, makes it a lot easier. So I'm clicking modify, and that's it. I don't have to do much. RackWare will make the best choices for me, but I have the ability to be more granular when I'm doing my migrations. And so that's it. This is all set up. Remember, here we are. This is our target compartment. We have our RackWare engine running. Come back over here to our wave and we press play. Let's see if I did that. So once you press play, it will go through and look at all the hosts within this list, and it will start to perform the operation that you selected with those hosts. Here, if we want to, so we start getting into troubleshooting and things like that, we can go ahead and just click on this little drop down. This drop down tells us where we are in the RackWare process. So here it is, it deployed the Win utility, it's running examine, and now it is automatically provisioning similar hardware in our target cloud. So this is key. And if I want to look at the logs, I come over here to this little information button, click on it, and this tells me where we are. But most importantly, this is what you want. So at the top of this, it gives you the verbose log. When you need help from support, or if you want to ask something, there's a failure or something to that effect, this is the log you want to send the support guys, or send it to whoever's running the proof of concept with you. This log has the true information. This friendly log is nice to look at, but it won't give us all the details we need to actually troubleshoot anything. So you can literally go like this, hey, var log RackWare, cool, let me look at that. You go, oh, so my RMM here, tail minus F. I love doing this. Let's see what's happening. So there we go, live. All the information that's happening, it's creating the virtual machine, adding the NIC, and it's doing everything like that in the background. So that's it. If you had 100 machines, you would tell RackWare how many machines you want to sync at the same time. I wouldn't try and sync 100 of them at the same time, so I might do them at 10 or 20 at a time, and it'll basically go through the list and it'll grab the first 10 or 20 that you've set up, and it will just in parallel sync those. Each RackWare engine can handle about 42 parallel sync operations. So when you start getting into thousands and thousands of machines you might want to sync, just talk to us about the actual architecture of that. We might deploy a few RackWare engines to manage all those parallel sync operations, but that's it. Really, hour and 7 minutes, and half of that is me talking from start to finish to actually start migrating my Windows host. And if we come over here to OCI, there it is. It's provisioning this host. It's going to sync all the data. Let's see what it's doing in the back end. I'll show you with a slide here. Nice little slide here. So go back, SSH configuration, preparing your Linux hosts. Remember, we had the RackWare user. We use that for Windows, making sure you open up port 22 in the firewall, download the installer, cat that public key, make sure you do your Windows antivirus exceptions. For the OCI cloud user, this is what we did. My compartment is disaster recovery. I created a group. I created a user. I added the API key to that user in the group that has the policy. Here's a sample policy. Allow this group to manage all resources in compartment disaster recovery. So that's just a sample policy, of course, because we have to be able to deploy virtual machines, connect networks. We need to be able to add disks, and we need to be able to connect in via SSH after we're done. Here's Windows Defender antivirus exclusions. It's all in the guide that we saw earlier. And here are some considerations for Windows. Okay, remember I talked about that local system user. So when this migration completes with Windows, and here's where I get a lot of people that didn't think about this. You do not want your new cloned hosts communicating back with your production environment, because they will have the same host name and they will have the same SID. It's a clone. So if it connects back to the prod AD server, it's going to bump off your production machine when it comes online. So you need to think about, how do I deal with this? How do I avoid that conflict? So you can firewall the DR environment off. You can actually configure within RackWare for the target machine to point to a different DNS server Therefore, it's a different AD server. So you've already migrated an AD server over, and you can have your new machines connecting into that so that you can log in through RDP and your domain users and things like that. But RackWare doesn't want to have to deal with the AD servers because we don't know if it's set up correctly in the target environment. So when the target machine comes online, because we use the system account, we can still connect in with that local system user and SSH, and we can validate that the machine came online. So just think about, what are you going to do with Active Directory? And what are you going to do about logins if you don't have Active Directory set up in the target environment? Because you can't log in with your AD account on your new clone target machine that can't talk to the AD server because you haven't set that up. So what do we do about that? We say, especially for POCs, create a local admin level account on the source host so you can use that when you log in via RDP on the target to validate the environment. So just think about Active Directory and how are you going to log into those machines after they're moved over. We talked about creating the wave. We did the deploy and what happens under the covers. So RackWare Engine connects into our source Windows and Linux hosts via SSH. I showed you when we were validating them. Runs queries within each OS, brings that metadata back to the RackWare engine, then uses that information to auto provision hardware, virtual hardware in the target cloud. And then here's what's key. After we've provisioned that virtual hardware, we then boot up that instance into a RackWare microkernel. We repartition and reformat all the disks to match the partitioning scheme of the source host. And once we've done that, we issue our capture or our sync command, which tells the OS to take a runtime snapshot. So that's a VSS shadow copy snapshot or an LVM snapshot. We then sync from our snapshot through the RackWare engine and write that data directly to the target disks. We then inject any drivers that are necessary for this to run in the target environment. And then we tell it to configure the networking, and then we tell it to boot up. So this is the process that's happening right now. And this is what happens under the covers. Once this is done, you have a target machine that's an exact clone of the source host. And then after we've done this migration, you can log in and take a look at your target machine, and then you can perform a Delta sync and get any updated files synced across to the target until you're ready to do your actual cutover. So your heavy lifting takes some amount of time, and then your Delta syncs are very efficient because all it needs to do is look at the source machine again, see which files changed from our original sync, and just sync those changes across to our target host. And so that's what's happening there. We got just enough time so I can do a high-level disaster recovery now because you understand the majority of the workflow. So disaster recovery is super simple after that. So let's come back here and let's go ahead and come back to our RackWare engine. We're going to go to waves. And remember, we set up that Linux host to be our other test machine. And that's also running in our production environment, right? So I'll come over here, say waves plus, create another wave, call this one Linux DR. We're going to use auto provisioning. We're going to get the IP address of that Linux machine here. So let me grab that one. All right. So very similar. The friendly name, you know, I like to put -src. Okay. It's Linux. And remember, the user is RackWare. So it's just the same as migration, right? It all looks the same, except for when we're doing disaster recovery, we don't want a direct sync. We're going to do a staged sync. And it's another big conversation on like how you want to set up the DR site. A lot of options there to support all the different RPO and RTO needs that you have. We're going to do a stage one. We're just going to sync to storage for now. So then I just give it the target information again. We'll call this one DR. And I hit, so stage one sync as opposed to direct sync, because we're going to sync it to storage. I'm going to show you that on a slide in a minute here. Create. Okay, so we have our new Linux DR wave. We're going to go ahead and give that provisioning information again. So only at the wave level, we just have to do this once. So we say, hey, when I do a DR failover and I want my target resources created, where do I put those? So we're going to go to our OCI account again. Perfect. We do want it in Phoenix, if I remember correctly. Yes, thank you. And then let's get that information again. So the same, we're just going to place it in the same one to keep this simple. Domain, our VCN. Right? So just like migration, because the disaster recovery engine just uses the migration engine driven through different policies, which we're going to set up. Our DR subnet, right? We're going to place it in disaster recovery, and we're good to go. Okay, so I have my Linux DR wave. I have given it the provisioning information of where I want to place this. The next thing I do is come to disaster recovery, and I go to policies, and I just hit the plus button, and we'll call this an hourly RPO, because the RPO is what we consider a stage 1 sync. All right. So we're going to say this, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this every hour. Well, I could do this every 5 minutes if I wanted to, or every 15 minutes. I'm going to set it to an hour because I don't want us to have syncs running on top of each other. So we're just going to set this to an hour for now. I can put my name in here to be notified, right? Hit plus and only notify me if there's actual errors. I don't want all my different notifications. So I now have a DR policy. I come back to my replication wave. I go to my Linux DR wave, and I have to apply that policy right here. So say, okay, great. So it's not a migration. Let's apply our DR policy, and let's start now. So as soon as I do that, when I look at my waves here, it's gone. It actually moves over into the DR section. So I come back to waves now, and here is our Linux DR wave. Let's just get this guy started. Okay, perfect. And this will have just enough time to see this through. So again, troubleshooting wise, you want to look at things from the GUI perspective. Here we are, drop down here. It's going to say, oh, here's what we're doing. We're creating this image. We're doing all this stuff. I'm syncing to storage. And I kind of pre-populated this, so I think it's going to go a little bit faster for us. When I was telling you about metrics and what's happening and how long they took, you can take a look here under the History tab, and this will tell us every operation and how long the operation took. So this is perfect for getting the metrics for cutovers and for the Delta syncs. So of course, our capture is going to take the longest because we have to move all that data to the RackWare engine. So what does that look like under the covers? Disaster recovery. Remember, we attached that block storage device to the RackWare. Oh, actually, you know what? We forgot to do that. Haha, that's okay. There's enough data here. Did forget something. We'll circle back around to that in a second. We have attached block storage to the RackWare engine. Let's do it right now real quick. And we attach an additional disk. And then we have to give that disk over to the RackWare storage volume. So we're going to do lsblk. Remember, we had this additional disk. We have to give this disk over to RackWare to use for disaster recovery. So we're going to do rwadm zfs configure. I got distracted after my network drop there. Enter the choice of one. Do I want to add extra disks? See, I already have a storage pool of 8 gigs because the engine just comes with that by default, which is more than enough for our current sync, but it wouldn't handle anything else. So I say, yep, give me some extra disk. It says, hey, this one's free. Oh, yes, it is. So we'll add that guy. And it says, great, we're finished. And now we have 126 gigs in our storage pool. I can add as many different disks as I want. I don't know what the limit is. It's like 257 or something like that. Nothing you would ever hit. And the sizing can be multi-terabytes of each. So you can have 50, 100 terabytes of disk space. And again, that's architecting the environment for how much storage you need. But what's important here is, look, RW pool, RW CLI, pool, show. That's going to tell me my storage pool. This says I've got 120 gigs available, how much is logically used, And what is my current compression ratio? So when you're architecting your DR environment, and let's say you have 10 machines, and each machine has 100 gigs of used data. We don't care about the size of these disks, just on the source machine, just how much used data there is. 10 machines, 100 gigs each, so we have a terabyte of used data. We would say, give RackWare 1 terabyte of disk space, even though it's not going to use it all because it's going to compress it. And the reason being is this. So RackWare engine connects into the source host, runs the queries just like migration, and then it runs the capture command, VSS shadow copy snapshot, LVM snapshot, what have you. And then it syncs the data to a captured image. So this is the image that lives within that RackWare data store that we were just looking at. And that's where all the data from all your source hosts will live. So right now, let's go back to our RackWare engine. Let's see what it's doing. It's already finished. So it was able to sync all the data from the source host to an image living in the RackWare data store. That took 3 minutes. I made this one really small so we can actually see the workflow. So that is the process that just happened right here. And now we start to make a few other decisions. The next thing we want to do is, after we've done our initial syncs, we want to set up our backup policy. So our backup policy is a typical backup and restore snapshotting retention policy. So we'll come over here to backup and restore retention policies. We'll go hit new. We'll call this backup hourly. Can't type today, right? And we're going to set the intervals. Say, you know what? Take a snapshot of my captured image every hour. Keep 24 individual hourly snapshots. Then take a daily snapshot and keep those for 60 days. All right. And then after I create the policy, come over here and I want to attach my images to my backup policy. I select it, hit apply. So I press that play button. Then I don't have any images now because we only have the one, and select it in the drop down. If I look at my policy, I can see that I have one image and I have one snapshot taken. So now what's going to happen if I come over to DR and waves, remember I set that RPO to 1 hour. So in 1 hour, or if I set it to 15 minutes, it would start a delta sync. So we did the heavy lifting, and let's simulate that. We'll just go ahead and start this replication again. And so now we're performing a delta sync where the RackWare engine is going to look at the source host for any changes, and it's going to bring the changes into this captured image. And then after every hour, it's going to take internal snapshots, and we're going to keep the snapshots here. Everything is siloed. It all lives within your environment. It's not a phone home. It's not a SaaS configuration. It is all siloed within your environment. So all the data is sovereign. It only lives in your environment. It doesn't have to phone home. All your data lives on this RackWare engine, which lives within your environment. Doesn't go to RackWare or anybody else, as a matter of fact. You don't need any extra access, no internet access from the RackWare engine. This is where we start making disaster recovery policy decisions on what we want to happen afterwards. So I can continue to sync my data to storage, and I'm fully protecting my running workloads now in storage in my DR site without using any additional resources. I don't have to deploy the actual DR resources to sync them. So I can leave it in storage, and then according to policy, I can either have RackWare continue to perform those delta syncs, and then during a DR failover, it will provision the target machines just like migration did, but it'll do it from the data within the captured image here. So I can either do this in a DR test and drill mode, deploy all my DR resources, or during a true failover where I say, hey, I'm in a DR situation, bring those resources online, or I can have RackWare create these resources and leave them online for me and continue to have more aggressive RPO and RTO sync times, and you can have any combination of those. And it's all a matter of performance versus cost trade-offs. This doesn't cost you as much because you're not running CPU and memory and disk space. This is going to cost you more because, yes, we're copying the data and we're having CPU and memory running. So you might have a combination. You might protect 200 machines. And out of your 200 machines, you might need 10 of them where it has an aggressive RTO and we keep these online. But the other 190 machines might have a 2 or 3 hour RTO. And if you have a 2 or 3 hour RTO, most likely this will deploy within that time frame because all this data already lives in the DR site because it already did the heavy lifting. So talk to us about that. We will help you with the configuration and figuring all that out. So here was my Delta sync. It only took 32 seconds because all it had to do was look for changes. We didn't have any changes. So now I can say, oh, hey, RackWare, I've got these machines. And if we go back over here, remember, here's our Windows machine that's running. Here's our RackWare engine. You say, well, I got a DR situation. I need you to deploy my resources. So we come over here and we can say, okay, here's the failover button. Do I just want to test my DR topology? So if I wanted to test it, I can just click test button. But I'm going to go ahead and say, no, this is a real DR situation. Go ahead and fail this over. Create my resources. So I just hit yes. And then RackWare uses that migration engine to create these resources. So what it does is it says, well, I'm going to look at the image that lives in the RackWare engine, and then I'm going to provision my target hosts, and then I'm going to write that data. So right now it's saying, okay, I got the data. I'm going to provision the hosts. And then once it's provisioned, it'll start to transfer the data and do all of the other RackWare magic under the hood. So if we look here real quick, there it is, already provisioning for us. So that is a really high level of disaster recovery. There's a lot of other stuff you can do with it. You know, that's a whole nother seminar, probably 2-3 hours, just on some advanced policy configurations and things like that. So you can do dynamic provisioning at a pre-DR event. I'm saying low cost, longer RTO. We only provision during a DR event. We can have different combinations here where we have it pre-provisioned and booted to the OS, or pre-provisioned and offline within the OS. So we can actually set this up where we create the target and then we power it off and only power it on for Delta Sync. So you can have kind of a middle of the road RTO. So you have a lot of different combinations here, or we can leave it booted in the RackWare microkernel so none of your licensing is coming up in the target environment. So you can have very aggressive RPO and RTOs without that. Next thing that's important is our support portal. So that is our support portal is, see if I can put this in the chat for you. It's rackware.freshdesk.com. I don't know if you guys can see that. So I put the support portal information in the chat. And what you want to do is if you want access to our support portal, you need to send this information to support@rackwareinc.com and we will get that to you. Okay, perfect. So again, you have access to this slide deck. The slide deck has this information. You need to send this information to support. Once you do that, they can get you a login or send it to your sales engineer. That'll help. And our support portal is pretty cool. Let's see if I had it up here. Yep. So this, of course, you can open tickets. We have a very robust support group across 3 different main regions from West Coast, East Coast, and we have an office in Pune, India. Most of our people have been with us for many, many years. But here, solutions, all these documents, how-to videos, manuals, everything we've been looking at, all the stuff I gave you access to, KB articles, that's all here under our solutions. So this is going to give you even more information, and this will always have the most updated information. That's where you can get, I gave you the diagnostic tools PDF to help you with troubleshooting. And again, if you don't know and forget everything that's going on here, send an email to support@rackwareinc.com or info@rackwareinc.com, and we will get back to you and help you with the information you're looking for. All right. I think I fit everything in there with a whole minute to spare, but that is really what I wanted to show you. We're going to have some. So one more thing I wanted to show you was those WAV files. Just enough time. So in the documents I gave you, there was a folder called WAV files. In those folders are a bunch of CSV examples. They're just examples, so you can't use them directly, but you'll have to change them. But you can add hosts just like we did in the GUI. But of course, when you have hundreds of them, you want to go ahead and add them to the CSV file. So here's the name, the IP address, what target name. Remember, Windows uses system. And then all those other things we did, shapes, and then networks to connect to, VCNs and subnets and all that stuff we did, it can all be set in the WAV file ahead of time. And then you just need to create these specific to whether it's the sync operation is staged, or if the sync operation is a host sync or a direct sync. So you've got some samples there, help you set those up. But yeah, definitely when you've got, multi-hundreds or thousands, this is how you want to do it. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining. Thank you for your patience with our little network issue a little bit earlier. If you have any questions, again, sales@rackwareinc.com or info@rackwareinc.com, and we'll get right back to you. And we'll leave this bridge open for just one more minute in case there was some other questions within the Q&A. I'll go ahead and drop off and see if I can say goodbye to everybody here, if this is going to work. I don't know. There we go. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Appreciate your time today, and feel free to reach out if there's any other questions.